free piece of advice. Don't start a company before. One of the reasons why we've been able to grow every single year is because we try to stay ahead of the trend. So it's like
AI and how OpenAI is training or asking developers to build code and therefore it can train its model.
But when ChatGPT came along, it was just so freaky. The things that it could do. People were just like blown away by it. It was like the change from the Industrial Revolution was compressed into a short time frame. It was that monumental of a shift. Humans, we are designed to be in tribes. Like, we are designed to have a community. People get their sense of identity from.
Zach, thanks for doing this with me. I appreciate it.
Anytime, we met at the KC AI Club 3 months ago?
Yeah.
2 months ago, something like that.
3 months ago, I'd say.
Small world.
And that's an interesting group in general, right? I mean, AI is definitely like the wave. And I see the head of that AI KC Club, Chris, his name, if I'm not mistaken. He's doing phenomenal with it as well. Like, he's done other, organizations as such, but this one has kind of taken off. You can see the engagement on LinkedIn and people are showing up and interested about it. What do you make of AI in general?
So I first got into it, it probably would have been September 2023. So kind of to give a little bit more context, the company I work for, we do custom software for large organizations, medium organizations, and startups every once in a while. And we started back in 2008 in July, which free piece of advice. Don't start a company before a global financial crisis. In general, that's not the easiest way to do things.
Right. Hard to time though, right?
yeah. And one of the reasons why we've been able to grow every single year is because we try to stay ahead of the trend. So it's we try to look out maybe 2.5 years into the future, get a good idea of what people are going to be asking about. So then we're already ready to, when the market catches up with it, people start asking us about, mobile or AI. It's we've been doing that for a few years now. So one of the things that we didn't do super well and we kind of overshot was crypto, specifically blockchain. We thought that more companies were going to use that than what they actually did. And from that, we had a fair amount of PTSD where it was okay, we wanted to kind of wait a little bit until AI was a lot more commonplace. And it was about summer 2023, we noticed every one of our clients was using ChatGPT for something or other. And we're okay, I think right now we're safe on it. In that time, there haven't been a lot of monumental shifts. When ChatGPT first came on, that was probably November, December 2022, somewhere around there. And when that hit, it was the world changed. Because people are not good at just immediately shifting in one direction or another. We like gradual change. I don't know about you. You didn't go from kindergarten to 8th grade. You had a few steps in between. But when ChatGPT came along, it was just so freaky. The things that it could do. People were just blown away by it. It was like the change from the Industrial Revolution was compressed into a short time frame. It was that monumental of a shift. So people are starting to, I think, get used to it. I mean, I use it on a daily basis. I used it last night, actually. My wife and I were having trouble with one of the New York Times puzzles. And so we kind of gave it, the question we wanted to ask, we could never ask in a Google search. Right. It was I need a word that has these letters in it, but if you use one of those letters, then this next letter can't be after it. I mean, there's no way to do a Google search for something like that. You need something that is truly a large language model that has just been trained on the entirety of human knowledge to even be able to begin to try to answer a question like that. So now that it's become a bit more commonplace, the question that a lot of people ask is all right, what do we do with this thing? How do we integrate it into our current business pipeline? How do we use it to decrease our operational costs? How do we use it to actually give ourselves a competitive advantage? And that's been the focus of probably almost all my conversations at this point around AI is like, all right, it's cool. What's next? And what do I actually do with it?
Right. It's quite broad as well, as you said. I mean, it is such a tool that basically has taken, in my opinion, and I could be certainly wrong, and correct me if I am, all of written content that humans have created, at least to some extent, or even audio and video content as well, to be able to make that much of a suggestion. And initially, when I started to dabble on ChatGPT, my struggle was finding precise solutions for the problems that I was having. And I'm sure some of your clients are facing the same thing.
Yeah, so what it was trained on is really like two sets of data. One is all publicly available pieces of text, which are like books that no longer have their copyright on them. So you think of like, I don't know, Ulysses or the Odyssey, like things that are just like really old that no one has claim to, which that's really easy to do. Twitter posts or Facebook posts, that's all stuff that's in the public domain. The other part that it was trained off of, which they probably shouldn't have trained it off of, was copywritten information. So it's actually funny I brought up the New York Times when I was using ChatGPT, because I think the Times is actually currently in a lawsuit against OpenAI because it was based on their analysis. It was very clear they trained ChatGPT off of information, like text from the New York Times, and they didn't pay them royalties. They didn't give them at least a heads up about it. So there's an interesting point that we're at right now in terms of what else is it going to be trained on? I mean, there's only so many books that enter the public domain every year. There's only so much text in the world. So there's two options that they have. One of them is to pay the penalty and just say, well, I'm going to train it on this. You can try to sue me, and I guess we'll see. If I win, all the better. If I lose, that's just the cost of doing business. Or you have companies like Meta, which are considering buying book publishers to be able to legally get access to those books. Meta was going to buy Simon & Schuster, if I remember right, one of the big ones. And there's, Penguin, there's Random House, there's all these different publishers that have a lot of text sort of behind their paywall. And so companies like OpenAI and Meta are just trying to figure out, like, is it worth it to either get sued to acquire these companies or to pay the royalties? And they're just going to pick between those three options, whatever is the cheapest. But now that it's been around for so long, they're kind of hitting a climax in terms of what it can be trained on. And one of the worries people have is that if you want to develop your own large language model, other than it just being like prohibitively expensive for anyone other than just a massive company, there's not a lot of original content anymore that is going to get trained off of. So you either have to create synthetic content, which is just going to be regurgitated from these large language models, or you actually hire people to create content for you. OpenAI has actually hired software developers not to work on ChatGPT, but to just write code and to document it. That way they own the code and then can legally train the models off of it. And I don't know if it's going to be this year. We're in September. It might be sometime next year where we see sort of a renaissance in terms of human-generated content. I mean, I don't know about you. When I see an image that was clearly created by AI, it kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Unless it's like a beautiful picture, like a sunrise or a sunset, or it looks realistic. Most of us can tell if something is AI generated. So much in the same way that vinyl kind of came back into vogue, we might see the return of people like demanding original content in the same way that they're demanding no more superhero movies. We want things that are new, we want things that are fresh, and things that come from other humans.
From other humans, yeah. I think that will be the major separator of people that are interested in getting original content that is crafted by a human. And it's, our ability to be able to take an information and imagination and come up with something original instead of, the other group of folks that would be interested in getting that piece of content generated by AI because it kind of looks similar and gets the job done momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about software, customer software in general, and the company that you work for. Maybe talk to me a little bit about your background and how you ended up in this position of, being a chief architect officer for a company.
Yeah. So I started, there's not many things, Emmanuel, honestly, that I do well in this world. I mean, I can make pizza. I'm going to be making pizza tonight. I'm 6'6", can't really play basketball too well, but I can write software. I've been doing it since, I was thinking about this earlier today, since I was 14 years old.
Wow.
And I mean, that's a majority of my life. The neural pathways that I have in my brain as I was developing as an adolescent, I can't decouple them from how I develop software. Like, that is just the lens that I see through the world. Much like Floyd Mayweather when he was growing up, every single day of his childhood was just boxing. So I hope I never have to change careers. I mean, I hope this whole internet thing, pans out. I hope it goes well. Because if not, I'm going to be stuck making bread.
Or maybe trying basketball again.
Yeah, maybe. But I got my first gig. I went to KU. I'm originally from Lawrence for computer science. Met my wife there. Got my first job right out of college doing software for education companies. So if you take, if you remember back in the good old days, you had the ACT, the SAT, there's a couple others. If you could tie that to your attendance for how many times, you were in school, or if you were like me, occasionally skipping class, if you could tie that to kids who are on free and reduced lunch, if you could tie that to how you did on every individual homework assignment, you could actually see a student's progress over time and be able to see which teachers had the most objective impact on them based on how they did on their standardized tests compared to kids that maybe had other teachers. So that got me, we were dealing with like massive amounts of data. We were doing a lot of different school districts. And it was fun, but I felt like I wanted more out of it. So fast forward, I get married. My wife is like, we got to think about having a job that's a little bit closer to home. I was commuting to Lawrence every single day from Olathe. And I put out my application to 20-ish places, a score of places. The only place that called me back was Keyhole Software. And 11 years later, I'm still here.
Right.
My first gig was actually not too far away from where we're recording this. It was for a financial services company. And then I got a call from my boss saying, hey, you want to go to New York City next week? Because we got a client and they need a lot of help. And I was like, sure, let's do this.
Right.
And it's a hospital. My main client is a hospital system out of New York City that I've been at for 9.5 years, if I remember right. And I started out as just a developer, and then I went to a team lead, and then an architect, and now at Keyhole Software, I'm the chief architect, which means every piece of work that we propose, every client that we talk to, I'm the one that sort of gets to paint the pictures. I draw the boxes for how things are supposed to go. Anything that goes right is always because someone else did something right. Anything that goes wrong is my fault.
Because you failed.
Which, it's okay.
That's a fair deal.
But I love being able to just talk to people like you. I get to, last year I literally went coast to coast. I was in Vancouver in the summer, and I was in DC talking to the Navy in November. So I went all the way across the United States this year. I've stuck to the Midwest mostly this year, but there's no other place that I can think of where I would get to talk about AI, get to talk about microservices, about mobile, about everything that I am truly nerdy about. I get the opportunity to do that on a daily basis, to where, I get paid for it, but I'd probably do it if I didn't get paid. It's pretty fun.
That's awesome, man. That's quite the career. So you kind of knew that you were going to be a software engineer from the jump.
Mm-hmm.
Quite the calling. Well, let's kind of touch back on AI and how OpenAI is training or asking developers to build code, and therefore it can train its model. Where would that put developers? Would that put them at risk?
Mm-hmm.
That are in college now.
Yeah, there's sort of one risk that everyone in the software industry is kind of on the fence on. I mean, I don't think we're at the place yet where software developers truly have to be worried about their jobs. It's good. OpenAI tools like GitHub Copilot, they're really good at being able to sort of ask questions of. Like, I actually did a presentation about a month ago in St. Louis on that, where it's like, if I have something that I kind of know that I want, but I don't know quite how to do it, I'll go and I'll ask it, hey, write me some sample code. And then I'm like, oh, that's the library I should be using, which then leads me down a rabbit hole, and I can get the answer much faster. To where I've found, even though I've been doing this for a long time, tools like that, if they make me 2%, 3%, 4% more productive, that's time saving for my client. And that allows me to actually work on more pieces of code than I would have otherwise. And so I think the fear that it is going to replace us is honestly overblown, because the biggest complaint of every software project I've ever been on is it takes too long to write custom software. If we reduce that time by 15%, we're going to fill that 15% because we're going to be able to work on more code. So if anything, I think it would cause us to, in the aggregate, be more productive than we would have otherwise. The tricky part, I think, are kids that are in school right now. If they become solely reliant on it to be able to write code, and they don't understand the nuances of why it made certain recommendations, if they don't get into the habit of understanding how to build like large, complex systems, it might be okay for a while, but 5, 10, 15 years down the road, I could actually see it making us less productive because we have more rewrites we have to do. We have more people that don't understand the nuances of what they're doing. And so we're at an interesting point, honestly, in my field, to where in a lot of ways for us that are more senior and want to pick up new technologies really quickly, it does benefit us. But I worry about the kids.
Yeah.
I'm a father of 2. I just perpetually worry about kids anymore.
Right. No, I see it. Well, let's talk a little bit more about custom software. What does that mean in general, and how's that different from off-the-shelf software for a company?
Yeah. So anytime a company has a problem, they have opportunities that they don't know how to capitalize on. They see that there are inefficiencies that they have in terms of your operations. If they want to give themselves a competitive advantage, software, maybe 80 years ago wasn't the first thing that they thought about, but now in 2024, every company, large to small, has to figure out, do I want to do something custom, or is there something that I can buy off the shelf? So a good example would be, if you want a website, you probably don't need to develop that completely from scratch. There's tools like WordPress or GoDaddy or Squarespace, something that you can get off the shelf. Back when you literally used to be able to go and like pick something off a shelf, that's where the term came from.
Right.
So probably 80% of people's needs can be solved by something that's already out there, that they might need to tweak a few things. They might need to customize it a little bit, but they can get away with it. The downside, though, to doing off-the-shelf software is that you tailor your business process to how the software is designed. Right. Custom software flips that, and the custom software is tailored to your particular business process. So if you have something that is different than all of your other competitors, if there is nothing that anyone has ever thought of doing it in the way that you have found yourself to be successful doing it, but you're limited because of, there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many people you can hire. If you can find ways of automating your custom processes, your custom business workflows, that's where custom software comes in. Good example would be if you're a movie theater chain. There might be some things that you could find off the shelf that could get you close-ish, maybe gets you 80% of the way there. But if that extra 20% is really the thing that is going to make or break your company, And if you can't have that and your competitors do, and customers are going to go towards your competitors instead, that 20% matters. That would be a really good justification for writing your own mobile application, for writing your own custom website. So you always have to think of it in terms of a balance. What's the return on your investment? A company that goes down the path of writing custom software, they're always going to be in the software business. I mean, we work for healthcare, finance, banking, agriculture, construction, manufacturing. The only thing I haven't done at this point, Emmanuel, I haven't shot anything into outer space yet. Like, that's a dream. Maybe one day I'll get to work for a client that shoots stuff into outer space. So pretty much everything sort of around sea level, I would say we've touched in some way, shape, or form. And that's the common theme, is these companies are really good in their particular industry, and they need custom software to help complement, to augment, to automate processes that if a human were to do, it maybe would take them a little bit longer, prone to human error. And if it's a system that's on 24 hours a day, processing ACH files, if you're in the banking industry, that is going to be worth its weight in gold if you can get that right. And it's going to set you apart from your competition.
So normally you've noticed patterns of triggers that would prompt a business to approach your company to say, we need custom tools for this particular problem.
And there's a lot of options that a company has when they want to go down the custom software route. They can go with a offshore or nearshore or onshore option. With an offshore option, usually it's some shop that has folks in the Philippines or Thailand or India. One of the reasons why they go with one of those firms is because of cost. I mean, it just, there's no way around it. The cost of living in some place like India or the Philippines or Thailand is less than the United States. So what you pay a developer in those countries, it's going to be less. Right. I would say that of our clients, the ones that have the most success doing offshore model are the ones that are very mature in their software development lifecycle. They've been doing custom software for 5, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, and they've got it down. Like, they know what they want. They have a really, really calcified vision of what the software should do, what it should look like, and then they need someone to implement it. Those, I think, are honestly the most at risk of being displaced by AI, because if you're that certain about what you want, you're probably going to be able to automate it. Or firms that do a low code or no code option. One of the big downsides to going with both offshore and nearshore, there are subtle nuances in the English language that, if you're not familiar with them, will lead you down a completely different path. Like, some things that we say, like, let's get on the same page. To a non-native speaker, they're like, what does that mean? Or, we've overshot the target. We need to, it's going to be a game time decision. All those things that just, we know exactly what we're talking about without having to explain it and elaborate on it. That's just something we know, because we're all in the same time zone. We all go to eat at the same restaurants. We send our kids to the same schools. We watch the same, sports teams. I mean, it's something that we all know. And in software, really in life, what often goes wrong is communication. Communication is like the hardest thing to get right. And every impediment that you put in a custom software project where communication gets farther delayed, you have the telephone game where, you got to talk to this person, and then that person relays it to that person, and that person. Custom software is hard enough to do in a room like this where we're all sitting around the same table. Imagine how difficult it is to be talking to someone on the other side of the world where the feedback cycle is days. You're using terms that they might not understand. It's really hard.
So it's just more of the communication piece could be difficult. But I could make the argument that some businesses would, they're limited with financial resources. Therefore, they might choose to go that route, even though those challenges are there. Are there any other challenges that you see besides communication that should keep a local business with a company that is local that can help them build the software?
Yeah, I guess there is a fourth option, is you can use a low-code or no-code platform, which, if you think of it like Legos, they give you a bunch of Legos, it's mostly assembled, and you kind of have to do the pieces yourself.
I see.
It's more of an 80-20 rule, because you could probably get 80% of it done within the platform, but that other 20%, if it doesn't support it, you're kind of out of luck.
Right.
There's not many other options.
Right.
So a lot of businesses will use low-code, no-code options to do proof of concepts, minimum viable products, just to get something out to market and figure out, is there a product market fit there? Those tools eventually crumble under their own weight because they charge based on the number of end users, which if your product is small, you have a niche group of people, you only have 5, 10, 50 people using it, those licensing costs aren't too bad. But if you become a product of your own success and you have 500 users, 5,000 users, your margins are going to get really, really small really quickly. So one of the reasons that why a company would go to some place like Keyhole Software, they have something that works. They know that there's a product market fit, but they're using a low-code, no-code tool, and they are just paying way too much for it, to where a onshore firm would be able to offer them a fixed cost of saying, hey, this is how much time we think it's going to take to get done. This is our best estimate. And when the product is done, it's yours. I mean, we don't charge licensing fees. We don't charge per user. It's your company's intellectual property. So if you already have something that kind of works, but you want someone that's done it before that knows how to do it, that's a really good reason to go with an onshore firm. The other reason, maybe you don't have a very clear picture of what you want. You have some semblance of an idea of potentially an application that could do this and do this and do this. And you want someone that is able to quickly iterate with you. Maybe you don't even have a custom software development team in your company. You could go out and hire developers. You could hire architects. It's tough if you're going to be the first people to lay down the first lines of code at a company. So a lot of people, they prefer to be local because that level of trust is kind of already there. I actually found someone in my neighborhood, that, I could work with. And that's kind of crazy that, I could go on the internet, find someone. I actually have probably 2 or 3 people in my neighborhood that are like, because we're neighbors, because we send our kids to the same school, right. We swim in the same pools, right. We drive on the same highways every single day. That level of trust, it's a lot harder to get when you're talking with someone that's literally halfway across the world.
I agree. There's no price to put on it. If you can afford it, absolutely. Definitely. Okay. Hiring a local company is certainly the way to go. Do you find businesses normally would use you guys to develop some sort of a software, then to white label it, or do you have a platform or a portfolio of products, software products that you can help small businesses buy and white label?
Yeah, every company does it differently. At least the way we do it, we actually don't own any of our intellectual property that we produce. It's all owned by the client. So everything is custom from the ground up, which has its benefit in that every single line of code gets tailored to their particular business needs. There's other companies that will do things like white labeling. I will say there have been a few projects where we've had to rescue people from that kind of mentality. If you can do it right, then it makes sense. I'm just kind of jaded because I've seen it go terribly wrong many times. Yeah. So, but a lot of ways to skin that cat.
To do it. So you mentioned industry. So what industry would you say predominantly uses software? And maybe when we say software, can we categorize them and put them in mobile apps and customer success management tools? And can you give me an idea of what those products look like in general?
Yeah, every industry is different in terms of what already exists off the shelf. no one is going to create another human resources custom app. I mean, there's so many out there, it doesn't make sense. No one is going to create, hopefully, another EMR. If you're in healthcare, I mean, you have Oracle, you have Epic, you have, it used to be Cerner. There's so many options out there to where it's only on the fringes. It's only on the things that these large companies don't have a need to make custom. That's kind of where we fit in. So, I do work with a clinical call center. And their use case is so unique in healthcare that there's nothing out there that is going to be able to solve their needs. Right. In banking, I mean, you have so many integrations that you have to do. You have so many different types of files that you have to process. There is nothing off the shelf that is going to get you anywhere close. In entertainment, your company's brand is your mobile app. The Gen Z, there's another term for it. The Zoomers, the generation Zoomers, like they're always on their mobile phones. Like, so anything that is like public facing for entertainment, it's going to have a mobile application. But if you're in a veterinary practice and you're dealing with animals, I don't think animals use mobile phones yet. Maybe they'll come out with something for cats and dogs. Yeah, that I don't recall it at the Apple event that just happened. So it really depends a lot on the use cases. Where we try to stick is really any industry that doesn't already have sort of the one option. Because if you're in that industry, you're going to be on that platform anywhere. Where we try to stick to is like, what are the areas where people don't have an option? Where they struggle, where they have to write their own workflows. I mean, if you have people that manage 20 spreadsheets to perform their duties of the job title expected of them, those are the best ones to automate because there's nothing out there. You already have a clear and concrete use case. You have people that understand the business domain. Those are my favorite kind of projects.
Okay, love it. Let's take an example, a case scenario of healthcare as a topic, right? Mm-hmm. And certainly you did say that you have clients that you service in the healthcare space. Someone that sees a problem with the healthcare industry, and or it could be a better interaction format with patients as a parent, let's say. And where would you tell them to start? How would that initial interaction would be? I'm sure we've all had ideas of an app. Mm-hmm. And if you're thinking about building an app and you have limited resources, let's say, but you need to do product market test, you need to do a lot of research to confirm that this could be a viable business to pursue and also ultimately build an app for it. Any advice that you can give startup businesses?
There's probably three things that come to mind. The first, you have to understand the business problem inside and out. If you talk about, a mobile app for parents, that inherently implies that there's something that they're doing on there for a child. And pediatrics, children in general, they have different rights than parents do. This is one of the things that I've had to learn about New York, because New York is special. If you're under 18, but you are a parent, you are pregnant, or you've been emancipated, you actually have a higher level of rights than if you were just a typical minor. Or if you're in a situation where your household is unstable and maybe you're in the foster system or at risk of being in the foster system, or you have issues with your parents, you'll have to work with a care manager at the hospital to come up with a plan for, okay, so where is your safe house? Who are the people there that are adults that'll be responsible for you? And the hospital legally cannot share that information with your parent because you have special rights. So having, honestly, most of software is not writing code. It's understanding the business problem that we're trying to solve. And I can get super nerdy about post-acute population health management. That's the very slim subset of the application that I write. So as an architect, that's my favorite part of the whole thing is getting into someone's head, figuring out what's the happy path, What are all the gotchas? What are the legal implications? What are the regulatory implications? Is there even benefit, that's where the ROI comes in, of having enough users to be able to actually pay for and justify the creation of the application? So having just living and breathing the use case that you're trying to solve, if you can't do that, then it's like you're already kind of 2 steps behind. The second option, kind of the second step of it, is a low-code and no-code tool to be able to prototype what you're thinking about. Just getting something in front of you, being able to see it on a screen. Some of them will actually create a mobile application for you that you can kind of play with, and it sort of feels like the real thing, and it's pretty close to it. But that'll give you enough of a sense of, okay, this is actually viable, this is something that people would pay money for, and then, at least the third option, you have to price out what that tool is going to cost you depending upon how many users you have. Some are linear, some are exponential, which is not great if it's exponential. And figuring out if you were to create a custom app or train your own AI or do any of these things, what's your break even? How much revenue do you have to be bringing in to be able to justify that cost? And for some small businesses, it is prohibitively expensive. A really good mobile application is at least $100,000, if not more. And there's probably going to be iterations, especially when you get into the mobile space. Apple just announced the new iPhone 16. That means that every single app on the App Store needs to be reviewed, tested, and a new version pushed up for that new form factor. Every single time they release a new iPhone. Android's even worse, because there are so many form factors that they have. There's always new versions of the Android operating system. So once you just start developing software, you're never going to stop, because you're always having to push it through. So there's the upfront costs of getting an app developed, but also the tender love and care of, well, your competitor added a new feature. Are you going to add that feature in, or are you going to do something better? Tim Cook released a new version of the iPhone. Are you going to lock your users into an old version of the iPhone, which some of the apps actually they don't allow you to run if they're too old for permissions and policy and privacy standpoint, or are you going to upgrade it? So it's those 3 things: business use case, some sort of MVP with a low code, no code tool, and then where your break even point. Those are the 3 things that I steer everyone towards. And if you get to the point where you have your break even point, you understand your MVP, and you understand your business use case, you have a pretty good shot at being successful.
Love it. Have you seen any pitfalls that businesses have came across as they come to you as a client, you give them a solution, but what obvious? It seems to me that you kind of play an advisor piece as well to your clients when it comes to software.
I also do bar mitzvahs as well. In a lot of ways, having a good architect, it's like having an advocate on your side, especially for clients that have never done software before. They don't know what they don't know. And that's not a bad thing at all. Like, developers will sometimes get into the situation where it's like, the client doesn't understand anything. They don't really understand how custom software works. And it's like, of course they don't. They didn't go to school for this. This is not something that they think about every night when they go to sleep. And it's not the first thing they think about when they wake up. Like, that's our job to help them with. So part of it is just, the emotional support that it takes, understanding what the right questions are to ask. But then, other than that, of just, everyone is in that same boat. It's always frightening to do it for the first time. It's like going on a first date. You never quite know what's going to happen. The other side of it is that they don't appropriately appreciate, once you're doing custom software, you're always going to be doing custom software until you either have your business sold off because it's so profitable and you get bought out. That's kind of our dream for all of our clients. Or you just decide, it doesn't make sense anymore, which for some, what you think works, when you actually get it deployed, maybe it doesn't work. Maybe the client base has shifted. And it's really, none of us are Nostradamus.
Right.
None of us can predict some of these things. So there is always risk, but as long as you make sure that thinking about it in terms of return on investment and how much revenue it could bring in, usually everything else takes care of itself. Unless there's some massive change, like quantum cryptography, something just crazy comes along.
You saying that kind of reminded me of the blockchain expectations you had that you overshoot and then it under-delivered to some extent. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, blockchain is kind of a solution in search of a problem. And when you have this really new, shiny tool, and we've kind of seen this happen with AI, it's like, I want to use it to solve everything. And that's not the best way of thinking about it, usually. You want to have a really firm understanding of a business problem and then say, this is a potential tool that I can use. You always think about it in utilitarian terms. It always has to be a tool. It is not a means. It is not an end. It is only a means to that end. So when blockchain got really popular, Bitcoin was going up in value, Ethereum was going up in value, Dogecoin was going up in value. Everyone was like, all right, how do I use this? How do I use this? How do I use this? And there are some good use cases. The two that always come to mind, supply chains for produce. When you have an E. coli outbreak, you want to just immediately be able to track back and say, this is the product that had the E. coli. These are all the other products that were in that batch. This is all the stores that they went to. Here's the source. Here's the farm that it came from. And there was some talk for a while in the US government of actually having regulations requiring that from a just sort of national security standpoint to make sure that they understood how their food was being sourced. That never went through, but that's not a bad use case for blockchain because you could tell that immediately. It's a distributed database that everyone puts information into. The other use case is actually Walmart Canada. What was happening was, it's kind of getting nerdy. In the United States, truckers get paid per mile that they drive. In Canada, they get paid per hour. So in the United States, if a truck driver gets slowed down because there's like a bottleneck, maybe there's an accident, they don't get paid any more than if there was no accident because it's the same number of miles driven. In Canada, they do. They do get paid more because the clock is still running. So there were a lot of cases where Walmart was accusing their truck suppliers of fraud because they thought they were being overbilled, when in fact, these truck drivers were really just, there was a pileup and there's nothing they could do about it and they get charged by the hour. So what they did was they installed GPS devices on the truck, like the truck itself in the cab, that every 15 minutes gave out the latitude and the longitude of where that device was. That went into a blockchain. So if there was ever a question of if this was a fraudulent charge or not, they could look and they could see exactly in 15-minute intervals where that truck was. And they could correlate that very easily to accident data, to traffic data. And their number of fraud claims went down like 95%. Which saved Walmart a lot of time because they didn't have to spend so much time wasted investigating these. And the truck drivers because they got paid for every mile that they were, every kilometer that they were on the road for every hour. So there were some really good use cases, but pretty much everything else fizzled out very, very quickly because it was just a solution in search of a problem.
Gotcha. Well, okay, let's talk about future trends and on those three spaces, blockchain, blockchain, software, and AI. What are the trends that you're seeing based on, when we started this conversation, you said you normally look into the future, at least 2 years into the future to make predictions. So nothing proprietary, but...
Yeah. So in terms of blockchain, I'm a day trader by hobby, so I try to keep up with the economics of what's going on there. There's not a ton of room for Bitcoin and Ethereum to grow. They already have Bitcoin ETFs. The only thing that they could make, they already have Bitcoin futures. The only thing I can maybe add is Bitcoin options. But even then, that's kind of stretching it. And the halving just happened, and there wasn't, it didn't go to the moon by any means, to use the parlance of the day. So I would be surprised if there's another resurgence in cryptocurrencies or anything related to blockchain. I just don't really know of a problem that it's good at solving. For software, I think mobile is still probably the biggest use case that we have to uncover. There's globally more people own a cell phone than actually have access to the internet. I mean, for a lot of people, their phone, like their 5G connection or 4G or sometimes 3G, is the internet. And we have some clients that we work with that go into the Amazon rainforest and they have to like put an antenna up through the canopy to get the signal. But with Starlink, I mean, just that's probably like the most tactile use case that I'm most excited about. Because when you think about it, like when you're on a computer, you're disconnected. You have your mouse, you have your keyboard, you have your monitor, but you're not directly interfacing with it. You're interfacing with it vis-a-vis these peripheral devices. When you're on your mobile phone, like it's in your hands. You can feel it. You can touch the buttons. And because of that, performance is probably the most important thing about a mobile application. Flutter, by far, is the best option that we have right now to write mobile apps. It feels better. Every client that we've done a Flutter rewrite for, they're just blown away by just how fast it feels in their hands. The other thing about software that I guess I'm excited about, but it also kind of makes me worried, the boomer generation has been around for a very, very long time. And there's a lot of legacy systems that they have been the ones to maintain. This was really apparent during COVID. My home state of Kansas, who I bleed Jayhawk blue, what they did, they've acknowledged that it's a problem. And one of their examples was their unemployment claim system. During COVID, you had to send your unemployment claim through a fax machine, which I can't tell you the last time I used a fax machine. I'm not even sure, honestly. I have to watch a YouTube video how to actually use a fax machine. But that fax machine sent it to a system that was written back in the 1970s. The number of people that can still maintain that system is incredibly low. Most of them, not to be morose, are probably 6 feet under. And that is a big risk that a lot of companies are running. If it ain't broke, don't fix is good till it breaks. So what we're seeing is actually a resurgence of companies that are working on COBOL modernizations. Some people are still on Java 4, Java 6, and we're on Java 20, something like that. They have all these legacy systems that they have not been keeping up to date, and they're starting to show some cracks. So if nothing else, I think I have a little bit of job security because there's always going to need to be refreshes. There's always going to be opportunities for these really old legacy systems that pose an existential risk to a lot of companies that need to be rewritten. AI can actually help some of that. AI allows us to, if we're unfamiliar with the code base, we can give it a file and just say explain what is going on here in English. And it might be, 80, 85, 90% correct, but that helps us be so much more effective. It helps us understand what's actually going on, helping our productivity in the aggregate by leaps and bounds. So AI, I think we're going to start viewing it more as a co-pilot than a pilot. It's never going to be the one that flies the plane, but it might be the thing that we kind of rely upon to be like, hey, what's this thing? And it'll explain it, okay, now I can go on with my job. So I hope that answered your question.
No, it did. No, we did go all the three of them. Software is certainly interesting as well, especially you seeing an interest in updating antiquated systems and bringing them to life for today. It is certainly interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about the communication piece being a major influencer in businesses deciding who to hire? How do you see you and your company, the company that you work for, Keyhole, solving that issue and coming in to secure a deal?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think we chatted over probably Teams or Zoom or something like that at some point in the past. And if you've watched my LinkedIn videos, you'll know that I have, a nice backdrop. I have a nice microphone. I have a nice camera. Now that we're in a virtual world, one of the things that aggravates me to no end about, some of my competitors is it's like they're still stuck in 2020. They still have like a really grainy webcam. They're using their laptops, microphone. You can barely understand them. And it's like, guys, this is 2024. We have to embrace the fact that we are no longer geographically isolated. I talk to people on both coasts of the United States on a fairly regular basis. And to do that, you have to have a nice setup. And it doesn't cost that much, but the return on the investment has just been like incredible. It's more than I could have ever anticipated. So that first impression, just like going on a first date, matters. Someone has to be wowed when they see you. But you also have to understand and be an active listener, an active participant in the conversation, to where I will, at the very end of a call, often recap, okay, just to make sure I understand, this is everything that I have heard. Is that correct? Did I get something wrong? Is there anything else that you need to add? And like showing people that you care, being able to use the same language, especially if you're talking about like banking or finance or energy. Energy is the worst. They have some very esoteric terminology. Just using the same words that someone else does. Companies have a lot of choices, but people typically like to work with people that talk like they do, that think like they do, that have the same values that they do. And that's been one of the things that's helped separate us over the 16, 17 years we've been in business. We care about people and we like people. We don't develop software for software's sake. We develop software to make someone's lives better. And if you don't understand who your end user is, if you don't understand their needs, I actually can, I personally know a lot of the end users from the application that I, develop. Like I understand what they want. I understand what they care about. If you can do that, if you can get into their head, everything else is just so much easier.
Makes sense. Well, speaking of communication, you see how I set up that segue for a podcast? Because you do a podcast as well, correct?
That is correct.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that podcast. The reason why you decided to create a podcast as well. It is, do you believe it's oversaturated in the space right now? It's almost as if everyone has a podcast. But tell me a little bit more about how you got into it and what it is all about.
Mm-hmm. When I started looking into AI, I had a decision to make. There were a lot of things that I did not know. And I could have spun my wheels. I could have spent hours and hours and hours trying to learn something from scratch by myself, which is, it's a good skill to have. But I wanted to figure out, how can I accelerate my learning? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a member of a community that is just talking about it. Tribal knowledge and immersive learning, they are powerful. And that is, just kind of as, from an anthropological perspective, humans, we are designed to be in tribes. Like we are designed to have a community. People get their sense of identity from their community. It's never something that they do in isolation from a molecular standpoint. It's always, our value is defined by who we spend the most time with. So I was like, this is an opportunity for me to go out and talk to people that have been thinking about this a lot longer than I have. So I decided to, kind of get, my jitters out of the way. It's always weird talking to someone online. I tell my daughters, if they're watching this, don't talk to strangers. Daddy talks to strangers. But
yes,
it's one of the hard parts about being a parent is do what I say, not what I do. So I went out and I just tried to find as many people that I could tell had a really good perspective, and they were all varied. I've talked to people in healthcare, in cybersecurity. I even talked to the guy that invented the App Store for Apple, back in the day. Just trying to get as broad of a perspective as I can on where's their head at in terms of where AI is going? What are the things that it does well? What are the things that it doesn't do well? And I figured, this is why I did the podcast, if I have these kind of questions, probably more people than just me have that same question. So why not be open about it? Why not open up the door to figure out, hey, maybe if there's a conversation that I have that someone finds beneficial, then all of it would have been worth it. But even if not, it's something that I've never done before. So I decided to have a little bit of fun with it.
It is fun. It is fun, and especially if if there's an objective behind it to get information out, and this ever-changing space, AI particularly, I think it is a good reason to do it. Same for me as well. I see a lot of inconsistencies and issues in the access to capital lending space, and some information is out there, and it's not quite correct from my experience.
Right.
But it is almost tailored in a way where it is attractive to sell courses or for short-term gains, and maybe there's a clearer way and better way to do it, and bring subject matter experts and like yourself and you in the software industry and have access to capital, AI. So all the topics that are important to businesses is what I like to talk about. So I relate the passion why you decided to do it. Anything else you'd like to put out, Zach? I appreciate you taking time to be here. Podcast, the company that you work for, or any other thing that I forgot to ask or that I should have asked.
I think you covered it. I can definitely tell this isn't your first rodeo. You've had a little bit of practice.
Thanks.
And, if people want to find more about Keyhole Software, if you like GIFs, that's the correct way to pronounce GIF.
Good.
Moving
Every time we had an argument.
So if you say GIF, I'm not going to hold it against you, but GIF, like the peanut butter, is how it's actually pronounced. My LinkedIn is full of them. I'm trying to hit 3,000 friends or connections by the end of the year. I'm making some headway on it every single day. It's got a brick by brick. But we work with companies large and small, and I love talking to people about how I might be able to solve real business problems to help automate away some of their issues with software. That's what I go to sleep thinking about. That's what I think about when I'm mowing the lawn, when I'm driving around town. And it's, the good Lord saw fit to give me just a few gifts, and that happened to be one of them. So, thank you very much for the invitation.
Absolutely. Thanks, I appreciate it.
Anytime, dude.
Yes, I do a handshake at the end of every interview.